Hello everyone and welcome to the 6th episode of my series Keynotes with Calcutta K.Srividya. In the past few episodes we explored various ragams and those videos can be found on my YouTube channel. In this episode we will explore a very beautiful and melodious ragam. A ragam that is very flowy in nature. A ragam that has its origin in Hindustani music and has been imbibed into the Carnatic style through some adaptations. The ragam Behag. Behag is the Janya ragam of the 29th ragam in the Melodious scheme, Shankarabaranam, and it takes the following notes: Shadjam, Antaragandharam, Shuddha Madhyamam, Panchamam, Chatushruti Daivatam, and the Kakali Nishadam in the ascending form, and it takes two additional notes in the descending form, the Pratimadhyamam and the Chatushruti Rishabam. The Arohanam Avarohanam goes like this. Over time, an additional variant of the Nishadam also got added, the Kaishiki Nishadam, and the Avarohanam can now be considered as Sa ni da pa ma ga re sa. Now in Hindustani music, the structure is slightly different, and the Arohanam Avarohanam goes like this. It starts with the Nishadam. Ni sa ga ma pa ni sa sa ni pa ma pa ga ma ga sa. Now a few points to note with regard to the structure of this ragam in these two forms of music. In Carnatic music, the Daivatam is used in both the Arohanam and the Avarohanam, the ascending as well as in the descending form. In Hindustani music, Da is absent in the Arohanam, and even in the descending form, even in the Avarohanam, in certain schools or gharanas, the notes Da and Re are almost treated as silent notes or meaned notes as it's called in Hindustani music, or anuswarams as it is called in Carnatic music. So in certain gharanas, the notes Da and Re are treated as meaned notes in Hindustani music, and in certain other schools and gharanas these notes may be explicitly expressed. However, they are still treated as short notes and don't get too much of prominence in this raga. Another point is obviously the fact that Kaishiki Nishadam got added into Carnatic music at some point of time, and this variant of the Nishadam is not present in Hindustani music. Now in this episode, we will explore the ragam Behag as is prevalent in Carnatic music today, and I will explicitly call out any references that I make to Hindustani music as and when necessary. Now Behag has a lot of compositions. There are a lot of them from many different composers like Maharaja Swati Tirunal, Sri Gopal Krishna Bharati, Sri Papnasam Shivan, Sri Surajananda, and many others. There are Varnams, there are Tillanas. However, there is no composition from the Trinity. probably because this ragam came into the Carnatic ream at a later point of time. So let's now explore this ragam in detail. Let's see what are the key notes, what are the key phrases, and how do we really explore around those. In Behag, the notes Ga and Ni, the Antara Gandharam and the Kakali Nishadam are the key notes. The note Ga is very important in Behag and helps establish the color of the ragam, and so it's called the Jivaswaram of Behag. A lot of exploration of this ragam can happen around this note through many different phrases. And in almost all these phrases, the note Ga comes in very prominently and strongly establishes the ragam. So in all these phrases, Ga comes with a lot of prominence, and at every point it establishes the ragam Behag. Now Ga can be used very often as a plain note, and most often with the Shuddha Madhyamam, and it can also be used with a gamakam. A gamakam, that is a slide from another note like a Pratimadhyamam. Now let's hear the first line of the composition of Sri Gopal Krishna Bharati, Irakkam Varamal, and hear these different aspects. Irakkam Varamal Ponadena Karanam Yen Swami Irakkam Varamal Ponadena Karanam Yen Swami Irakkam Varamal Ponadena Karanam Yen Swami Irakkam Varamal Ponadena Karanam Yen Swami. Here, Irakkam Nisa Ga Risa, where the Ga has come in with that plain note. Karanam Pamaga Maga, where the slide has come into the Ga from the Pratimadhyamam. Pamaga Maga, and again a strong landing note of Ga with the Shuddha Madhyamam. Now Ga can also be used with a small gamakam, a gamakam which is very subtle and short within its own position. Now the slide into Ga need not happen only from the Pratimadhyamam, it can happen from many different notes. Let's hear Muruganil Marupayar, a composition of Sri Surajananda. Muruganil Marupayar Alagu, Muruganil Marupayar Alagu, Muruganil Marupayar Alagu. The slide has come from ni here. Sa ni ga ma ga da ga ma ga pa ma ga ni sa ga. So slide can happen from anywhere. In fact, most of the notes in Behag take these similar forms of usage as a plain note or as a sliding note from different notes, or sometimes a small gamakam with that within its own position. And it is this sliding nature that gives this ragam that flowy feel. Let's now move to the madhyamam. There are two variants of the madhyamam, the Shuddha madhyamam and the Prati madhyamam. The Shuddha madhyamam is the dominant one and can be used both in the ascending form and in the descending form. So ascending as well as descending, this Shuddha madhyamam can be used. Mostly used as a plain note. Smarajanaka Shubhacharita Sasamagama, all are plain notes, a composition of Maharaja Swati Tirunal. Sasamagama, Gama, all are plain notes. Ma can also have a very beautiful frill or a jump from Pa. Tana, tadari, na, 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 maga. That is a very commonly used phrase in Behag, and it brings about that beautiful color to the ragam. Pratimadhyamam brings about a flavor to this ragam Behag, and it needs to be used in the right proportion and in the right manner to bring about that right flavor to this ragam. Now this phrase pamaga maga is a signature phrase of Behag, and this one phrase can identify this ragam. Tadari na 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 na, re na 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 na. So when used in conjunction, when this Pratimadhyamam is used in conjunction with the da and the ni, it brings about a very beautiful color to the ragam, and it needs to be explored in this fashion. Now let's hear, or let's analyze this phrase, the signature phrase, a little bit. Here, the two variants of the ma, the Pratimadhyamam and the Shuddha madhyamam, these are interspersed with the Gandharam, the Antara Gandharam. And it has a landing strong Antara Gandharam. Now, if I remove the interspersing ga, how does this sound? Now to add to this, if I stretch the length of the Shuddha madhyamam a little bit and reduce the length of the landing Antara Gandharam, how does it sound? Now this phrase is definitely not a phrase of Behag. It is a signature phrase of the ragam Hamir Kalyani. And so then it's very important to use these two variants of the ma correctly to be able to bring about the color of Behag. And a very safe way of doing this is to intersperse it with the Antara Gandharam. and you're very clearly in Behag. Now a point to note here, or I would like to call this out, that it is not necessary that the note ga always has to be interspersed between the two variants of the ma for a phrase to be in Behag. One can very well present a phrase with the two variants of the ma one after the other and be very beautiful to Behag. Only thing to be cautious about is that the precision is very critical. The precision of the length of the notes, the precision of the spacing of the notes, and the landing ga that comes in. Let's hear a beautiful example from Sri Lalgudi Jayaraman's Tillana, where the Anupallavi goes like this. Takadim tadim janu tadim taka janu taka teri kita tum sani pamamaga, where it's a beautiful phrase to Behag. The two variants of the ma are one after the other, and it comes with a strong landing note of ga. If we observe it, we find that both the variants have equal length, equal spacing, and it sounds so beautiful to Behag. Let's now move into the next note, the Nishadam. There are two variants of the Nishadam in Carnatic music, the Kakali Nishadam and the Kaishiki Nishadam, where the Kakali Nishadam is the dominant one. Now the Kakali Nishadam again is a very, very important note to Behag, and it brings about the color of the ragam, and hence this note is also considered to be another Jivaswaram of Behag. Ni is used as a plain note. It could also be used with the gamakams that we spoke about in terms of sliding or a small subtle gamakam within its own position. Sri Lalgudi Jayaraman, he starts his Jatiswaram with a plain note of Ni. So Ni, that's how he starts, that plain note of Ni. Now the Kaishiki Nishadam should be used sparingly. It's an optional note. In fact, it is not even present in the entire Jatiswaram of Sri Lalgudi Jayaraman. It's an optional note, and when used sparingly, it can bring about a very different color to the ragam. Sri T.R. Subramaniam uses this note very, very beautifully in his last swaram of his varnam. Da ni re ni da pa ma da ma ga pa, da ni re ni da pa. So the Kaishiki Nishadam has been used so beautifully, and it brings about a very different color to this ragam. But again, to note, it needs to be used sparingly so that the color of the ragam is retained. Now let's move to the notes Da and Re. As I mentioned when I started this episode, the notes Da and Re are treated almost as meaned notes in many schools in Hindustani music. However, in Carnatic music, both these notes find explicit expressions, and these are used in phrases prominently. Although these notes are not really treated like nyasa swarams, or these are not treated as notes where you can land and rest and explore a lot around it. However, these are still given prominence in the phrases that uses them. In fact, the swaram that we just heard of Sri T.R. Subramaniam's Varnam starts with that note of da very prominently. Da ni re ni da pa, but that da comes in very prominently. Similarly, the note re sounds very beautiful when used in certain phrases. Phrases like ba re na 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 pa re ga ma da ma ga. So in phrases like this, the note re comes with that elegance. Now I just also want to talk about a few phrases that are important in Behag, especially in the segment from pa to sa as we move towards the tarasthai. Just to recollect, the arohanam in Carnatic music goes like sa ga ma pa ni da ni sa, and in Hindustani music it goes like ni sa ga ma pa ni sa. Now, keeping this structure in mind, a very common way of moving upwards is this phrase pa ni sa ta da re na 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 ta da re na ga ma pa ni sa. It's a very, very commonly used phrase in Behag. Sri Lalguri Jayaraman's Jati Swaram uses this phrase very beautifully in his first swaram. Ni ma da ga pa re ma ga sa ga pa ni. So ga pa ni. So that phrase comes in. In fact, in this swaram, it would be interesting to see how the flowy nature of Behag comes through so beautifully. Ni ma da ga pa re, where that slide from one note to the other gives that feel so well. Another way in which one can ascend is pa ni da sa ta da re na na na. Sa is again a very, very common and often used phrase. Smarajanaka shubha charita. First line itself you can find it. Sa sa ma ga ma pa pa ni da sa. Or in the Tirupavai, Oruthi maganai olithu valara oruthi maganai pirandu. So, oruthi maganai olithu panidasa valara kamapadanisa. Now that is another way in which one can move upwards. Gamapadanisa. Now, keeping the structure of the ragam in both Hindustani and Carnatic music, the first phrase pa ni sa is used in both Carnatic and Hindustani. However, the two other phrases that we spoke about, pa ni da sa or ga ma pa da ni sa, these two are used only in Carnatic music and not in Hindustani music, given the fact that da is not present in the ascending form in Hindustani music. So we explored the ragam Behag in detail. We looked at what are the key notes, what are the key phrases, how do we explore around those. Let's now hear a glimpse of this ragam. I'll conclude this episode by singing a couple of lines of a composition of my mother and Guru Srimati Vasanta Kannan. கண்ணிருக்கும் வரை கண்ணனை காண்போம், கண்ணிருக்கும் வரை கண்ணனை காண்போம், கண் குளிர மனம் கனிந்துருக தினம், கண்ணிருக்கும் வரை கண்ணனை காண்போம், கண் குளிர வரை கண்ணனை காண்போம், கண் குளிர மனம் கனிழ்ந்துருக தினம், கண்ணிருக்கும் வரை கண்ணனை காண்போம், கண்ணிருக்கும் வரை கண்ணனை காண்போம், கண்ணிருக்கும் வரை கண்ணனை காண்போம், கண்ணிருக்கும் வரை Those were my keynotes in this very, very beautiful and melodious ragam Behag. And as always, I would love to hear from all of you in terms of what are your keynotes and how would you approach this very, very melodious ragam. Thank you very much.